want to know what it is. The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to the Jason Wright Show. I know it's been a minute since I put out a new episode, but that's just because I just haven't felt it. I haven't had anything that I thought was really worthy of getting behind the microphone for. And so it kind of broke my consistency, and I apologize for that, not because you've probably been dying to hear a new episode, but just because I think it's always good to know that whenever you're looking for something on the show, or you look to turn on the, you look at your Apple Podcasts or Spotify and you're expecting a new episode to be there and there's not one for a long period of time, I just think that does a disservice because you're kind enough to listen, and I want to be there whenever you seek out a new episode. And so I was fortunate that I'm reading a book right now where I just learned of a story that I thought was absolutely worthy of an episode. Now, I've titled this The Anatomy of the Matrix, and here's why. We hear about this concept from the Matrix, living in the Matrix. So many people live in the Matrix. And what does that mean? Well, it means that they live in this kind of premeditated world that is based on consumerism, and decisions that we make are really not even decisions that we're making, but they're decisions that society has made that we kind of just conform to, that we don't even know what's real. We only know what we are told is real. The reason why we drive the car we drive is not because it's really what we like and because it's what we want, but it's what society has told us we should want, what we should like. The Matrix has said, this is the car for you. These are the clothes that you should wear. These are the foods that you should eat. This is what tastes good. This is what doesn't taste good. This is what makes you important. This is what makes you not important. So that's kind of the idea of the Matrix. And I was reading this book by Chuck Palahniuk, who is the author of Fight Club, and I'm probably pronouncing his last name wrong, so please give me a little bit of grace on that. It's a difficult last name. I've heard it pronounced like 4 different ways. I say Chuck Palahniuk. If that's wrong, I apologize. Bottom line is, good author, wrote the book Fight Club, and he's also written this book called Consider This. And in this book, he talks about a workshop that he attended, and the discussion was rejection. All of these writers were talking about how they had been rejected from different magazines, different publishers, even different agents that refused to represent them because of the genre that they wrote. And Palahniuk talks about how it's at the end of the class and he's talking to the instructor or whomever's leading this workshop. And the guy kind of looks over his shoulder and he pulls out a book and then he puts it back. And he pulls another one out and he puts it back. And then he pulls one out and he says, here, read this. This will make you a better writer. All right, so Chuck Palahniuk, he takes this book and he goes home and he starts to read it. There's a problem. He hates the book. He doesn't understand it. And therefore, he has no idea why the instructor asked him to read this particular book. it sucks. It's just not resonating with him. And so the more he reads it, the more he starts to doubt himself, because he's like, this is an important book. I'm supposed to like this, and I don't. I can't even pretend like I like it. I don't like this book. So he goes back and he talks to the guy, and he's just kind of defeated. He's like, you've given me this book to read that is supposedly so good, and I don't even get it. I don't like it. I can't stand it. I don't know what the problem is. And of course, I'm paraphrasing all of this, but and so eventually the guy that's the head of the workshop said, oh, that book's awful. And he said, well, why'd you have me read it? And he said, because I want to show you that even crap books get published. And people who are smart will say that they like the book. And that's what happens so often in life. We start to question ourselves because we know in our heart of hearts, we know deep down in the recesses of our brains where no one else can see, that there's something that we don't like, but we feel like we're supposed to like it because the right people, the smart people, like it. And a light bulb went off for me, and it made me think, this is how the Matrix is constructed. This is how it begins. We know that something is wrong. We know that something is off. We know that something is not entertaining. Look at most of the movies now that win Academy Awards. People don't like them. The smart people, in air quotes, like them. So we have to say we like them. It's almost heresy to say that Godfather 2 is better than Godfather 1. Why? Because the smart people always say that there's no way a sequel can be better than 1. I had this happen to me. A good friend of mine who listens to the show, who's been on the show a couple of times, friend of mine over in the UK, Stephen Hussey, Oxford scholar, brilliant guy. I love Stephen. And his favorite book of all time is Ulysses by James Joyce. So I thought, well, if that's what Hussey likes, I got to read it, and he's a classically trained scholar in literature. I'm like, if he likes it, and Ulysses is arguably one of the best books of all time. It ranks right up there with Homer's Odyssey, Don Quixote. It will always come up as arguably one of the best novels of all time. I can't stand it. It's too hard for me to follow, and that makes me feel like an idiot. Now, I don't think that The Matrix has made Ulysses a great book, but that's a good example, because if I listen to other people who have talked about Ulysses, they say it's overrated and it's gibberish, and they say that they have made the comment that smart people say they like Ulysses, even though it's really not that great. And then by the same token, it's funny. So David Foster Wallace, who wrote the book Infinite Jest, this just mammoth book that is so unbelievably hard to follow and is just considered one of the greatest novels of all time. And he's considered a genius. And it's one of those things that I read it and I'm like, is the Matrix just screwing with me? I don't like this book, but I'm supposed to. Either that, or I'm just stupid. I'm not smart enough to get it, or I don't have a good enough taste to like it. Or what about food? How many times have you ever eaten something like caviar? You take a bite of it. And the good thing about it is the Matrix doesn't get kids. I remember one time we had this house party and we actually had some caviar there. And one of the guests of the party gave my oldest daughter, Rylan, a bite of the caviar. And Rylan immediately wanted to spit it out. It was disgusting. It was gross. She didn't like it, didn't want it. To this day, she is haunted by her bite of caviar. I don't like caviar, I'll tell you. And now I'm to the age where I don't care about liking the right things or not liking the right things. I just say I don't like them because I'm trying my best to escape from the Matrix. But that's the beautiful thing about children. Rylan had not been sucked into the Matrix yet. She wasn't like trying to act like she liked it. She was kind of like Josh Baskin in the movie Big. Remember that? He goes to the Christmas party and somebody gives him some beluga caviar and he starts just coughing and spitting it out. Why? He's a kid. He hasn't gotten into the Matrix yet. But we as adults, we do that. We fall for this crap that we're not able to be honest with ourselves whenever we don't like something, to be able to say, I don't like this and I don't have to like it. And as I read that, I thought to myself, that was a great example of how, one, you shouldn't be so hung up on, like, in the instance of writing. I think that was kind of the point in this book, was like, first of all, don't worry. Even crap gets published. The Matrix will let some crap in if the right person in the Matrix says that it's good, even if it's not. But more importantly, don't write for other people. Don't always try to please others. Write for yourself. Write what you like. Be honest with yourself. Be authentic. And I think we should practice doing that. At least, I mean, for me, I'm not here to lecture anyone on the other end of this. If you're watching this on the YouTube channel, or if you're watching this on a short or a reel, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm not here to lecture you, but I'm here more as a kind of like one of these revelations that so many of these monologue podcasts that I do are, which is to say that I want to try to be authentic with myself and be honest with myself and the things that I like, the things I find important, the things I find right and morally, the things I find morally right and true, and those things that I don't, because and be honest about the things that I don't, because if I don't do that, then I will fall into the matrix and I'll lose sight of who I am. And before long, I have been blue pilled and I'm gone and I don't even know who I am and what is real and what is not, because I've been lying so long. I don't ever want to lose sight of, do I appreciate this thing and enjoy this thing and like this thing because it's truly matching with my passions, my desires, my tastes, the things I hold dear? Does it match with my values? Or have I abandoned all of that to be able to be in some sort of cohesion with the matrix? This is how the matrix is constructed. It's selling yourself out to the forces that have said that we look to and that society upholds and says, those people are important, those people are smart, they're the beautiful people, the smart people, the learned people. So therefore, if they say it's good, then it is. I was having a conversation not too long ago. It was a digital conversation going back and forth through either Instagram or email. I can't remember which it was, with one of my friends in Europe. And I could tell we were talking about a pretty sensitive issue, news of the day. I won't go into what it was. And I could tell he did not have an original thought in his freaking brain. He was regurgitating to me this crap that he had read on this topic, almost verbatim, assuming I had not read it. And that's the good thing about being underestimated. You see, the good news is when you're somebody like me, which is basically a hick from East Texas that went to a small no-name state school, can't possibly know anything. And I'm not saying I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I got a decent amount of knowledge, right? I try to read a lot. I try to understand the world. I look at history and I read both sides. And so I guess I am well read, which does not, a lot of people think that if you've read a lot of books, then you're smart. Trust me, not the case. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm just saying I know a lot of stuff. Some useful, some not. Some of it's just crap in my head. But I'm sitting there and you could tell he had fallen in lockstep with the Matrix. And he was following the line of the day. This is what you have to believe on this topic. There is no varying. And it was kind of like that. You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of that scene in Good Will Hunting where Ben Affleck goes up to flirt with the Minnie Driver character and the dude they work from him. And then Good Will Hunting comes up and just slays this guy intellectually with his wicked smarts. But essentially he's saying, you don't have an original thought in your head. You're just regurgitating a bunch of crap that you've read. And you're trying to impress this girl and embarrass my friend when in fact you don't have an original thought in your brain. And that's what I was thinking about my friend at this time. I'm like, you don't have an original thought on this in your brain. You're succumbing to the fact that, one, what you're saying is politically correct, especially since you're in Europe. And two, I know what books you got this from. And it really made me sick. It made me lose a lot of respect for this person. And the older I get and the more okay I am with my faults, and I've got many of them and I try to correct them, but also the more okay I am with the things that I like, that I'm able to just be honest and go, you know what? I think a freaking really good hot dog is gourmet, baby. I love it. I don't have to talk about foie gras and all this, tartare and all these other fancy foods. And I've eaten them and some of them are pretty good. Some of them are like just not worth the hype. And say I have an uneducated palate. I don't care. Just give me a hot dog. Great example of this. Jimlin and I and our youngest daughter were in France, in Paris, last summer, and we're having a chef's table dinner. Okay. Don't invite a bumpkin from Sulphur Springs to a chef's table dinner at one of the nicest restaurants in Paris, France. Just don't do it. He's going to piss everybody off because these people take it very seriously, right? We go downstairs. It's like a scene from Goodfellas where they walk you to the back door and all around, just so that Henry and Karen can sit at that front table. But it's like it took them longer to meander through the kitchen and the back of the freaking club to get to their seat than if they just stood outside and come in like everybody else, right? That's what it was like. I mean, we're walking around and we go down this little secret elevator and then we walk back behind where we can see the kitchen and the work staff. And we're kind of like having to go down these little bitty hallways until finally we go to this secret room. It's like this vault. And all of a sudden the guy that sits us down, he like hits a button and there's like, and these windows open to the kitchen. And there is the head chef. Now, a head chef is a big deal, especially in Paris, France, right? I mean, this is where the greats go to train. So this guy, he's like serious. I mean, he's big time. And the owner of this restaurant, he had Michelin. This is like a multi Michelin star restaurant. So really nice. Again, somewhere I did not need to be. I mean, a guy like me does not mesh in a place like this. All right. So don't misunderstand. But we sit down and it's like silent. I mean, you could have heard a fly fart in this thing, which is just like, that's not how I want to roll. And so it was one of those moments where from the beginning, we're like, oh my gosh, we had this amazing opportunity. We're going to eat in this incredible setting, Paris, France, chef's table. We'd never done the chef's table experience. And we all just felt like such fish out of water. We're like, what's going on? To the point where we were able to be honest and say, and we started out saying, okay, we're supposed to like this.
So we are in a Michelin-rated restaurant at the chef's table. We don't know why we're here. We're not chef's table Michelin restaurant people, but here we are on our anniversary eve.
And we were trying like, okay, this is what the really smart, well-educated people, meaning, by as it relates to food and culinary experiences and all this stuff, they're supposed to like this stuff. And we don't. This is not fun. So we go through this multi-course meal. The food was beautiful. It looked great. But was there one thing there that I would ever care to have again? Yeah, negative, Ghost Rider. I'm sure it was amazing to the people who know what amazing is, but do they? They know what they've been trained to think is amazing and how to appreciate that stuff. And God bless them. I think that's great. But you know what? Is that the Matrix saying that it's great? Because I think a hot dog is pretty freaking good. One of the best meals, I was telling Jimlin this not too long ago, one of the best meals I've ever had was a hot dog during a Washington Nationals game in Washington, D.C. with my buddy Jonathan Wolf. It was an amazing hot dog that I will never forget. And back then I would still drink. So I had a big old ice cold Budweiser. And I guarantee you, I would take that meal over that chef's table dinner anyway, or any day. And now that I refuse to just doubt myself about what I like and be just flow with the Matrix, I'm like, no, this is what I like, and I'm okay with that. That's what I used to. I was never a big Anthony Bourdain fan. No, I didn't have anything against Anthony Bourdain. I'm not the type of guy that follows the food channels, and I know people love Bourdain, but what little I did know about him, and in fact, we a lot of the restaurants where we ate, including St. John in London last summer, was based on Anthony Bourdain's recommendation, and here's why. If you know anything about Anthony Bourdain, one of the things that he hated was snobbery in the food industry. He hated the fact that, like, that chef's table experience, he would have been so uncomfortable in that situation. He would have hated it. He would have hated, and he's a guy that was so talented. He could have been the guy that we were looking through the glass to watch prepare that meal, right? But he couldn't stand that. He couldn't stand the pretension and all that. He just was like, go eat what's good. If you're in New York, you probably need to go eat a Dirty Water hot dog. If you're in Chicago, you need to get some deep dish pizza. You'll go eat. If you're in Philly, get a Philly cheesesteak off at a stand. Go eat what that town is known for. And so we went to St. John, which was a very, very traditional English restaurant, and it was fantastic. I mean, I had some things I'd never eaten there, but like roasted pig's feet and there was something else we had that was really kind of funky, but yet just so good. And I think that's that's what we need to look to do, is to be authentic. I guess that's the real gist of this is, and maybe in that story, Chuck Palahniuk, he was really basically just trying to say that, hey, look, don't let rejection get you down, because there's some crap that gets published, right? Even garbage gets published, and just because smart people say this is good doesn't mean that it is, because the book is awful. What I took the light bulb that went off to me is, that is the anatomy of the Matrix. That's what happens. It's when you start lying to yourself about what you really want, about what you really like, about what you really enjoy, about the things you value. And I think we need to, especially now in this age where, look, here's the thing. We're living in a much more postmodern society where I have a great episode of the podcast coming up next week with Rabbi Daniel Lapin, who's kind of like he's almost like a Rabbi Jordan Peterson. He's just fantastic, prolific author and very, very wise man. Had a great conversation. And one of the things that he said was, the problem with a lot of academics is they sit and they constantly think, but they never do. They think about how tools should be used, and even which tools should be used to do a thing, whether to build or construct or fix, but they never actually go and do it. And he said the problem with that is, when you're constantly just thinking, there's this elasticity that we have with ideas that can be continually expanded and expanded and expanded. I mean, that's how our minds work, and the human mind is greater than all other of the animal kingdom, and our ability to just twist and try to manipulate things into the way we want them to be, regardless of how they should be. And he said that's a very dangerous thing. And I think that's what happens is you have these people that they can start to construct the matrix in their mind, and then before you know it, they try to put it into practice. And because the smart person thought that should come to pass, then it does, and we start falling in line. And people don't have the courage to stand up and say, that's dumb. This book is crap. I'm not going to read this, and I don't care who says it's good. Maybe it was good to them, but it's not good to me. And to say that it's good when it's not, to pretend I like it to look smart, would be to lie to myself and everyone around me. And if you do that enough, then you will be sucked into the matrix. That is how the matrix is built. So I just wanted to that was one of those that, look, I haven't wanted to get behind this microphone. Again, I've got a lot of stuff going on, and I just haven't felt it. But when I read that, I thought, that kind of got me fired up. I was like, that's worth recording. And I hope anyone that listens to this, if there's something that you have not even pretended, but if you're doubting yourself as to why you don't find value in certain behaviors, in certain friends, in certain company you're keeping. If you're wondering, if you look around, I had this conversation with a friend of mine this morning on a walk, John Landis. So John, if you're listening, I thought about this when we were walking, buddy. We got to talking about these people that live in these big houses, these giant houses, of which they spend 80% of their time in 20% of that big house, right? And he's, he and his wife, they're expanding their family. They're about to have their second child real early, and they need a little more space. They actually need the space. But then we get to talking about how you look back on the houses that our grandparents grew up in, how small they were, how many kids they would raise in a one bathroom house with like 2 or 3 bedrooms. They were on top of each other, and they did just fine. And we've just become accustomed. The matrix has made us think that we need all this extra space. Jimlin and I have by today's standards, a relatively small house. And I tell him that's one of the ways I get out of the matrix is I look at history and I try to tell myself it worked then just fine. Don't be caught up in what everyone else is doing just because the matrix has said you need more space. You need 3 living spaces. You need an extra bedroom just in case. You need more bathrooms. A house is what you make of it with the memories and that sort of thing. And that's a conversation for another day probably. But I hope that, I will continue to do this. And I hope you'll join me in not getting sucked into the matrix, because this is how it's constructed. This is how it gets built. This is the anatomy of the matrix. It's whenever someone that you think that the matrix is called smart and enlightened, they make a choice that is contrary to you, your values, your thoughts, your likes, and you questioning yourself, not based on what you're thinking and feeling, but based on what you think you're supposed to be thinking and feeling because of what they have decided. Be honest with yourself. Never, ever, ever compromise what you know to be truth. I hope that maybe this was a light bulb for you too, and I hope you will always continue to improve always and always. I'm Jason, and I'm out. Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian Letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.